evening. Our top story this week. In Florida, George Zimmerman gets away with murder after being found not guilty in the shooting death of Trayvon Martin. A Florida judge is lashing out at the child protective industry for doing nothing prior to a previously reported infant suffering life-threatening abuse. And Florida's DCF chief resigns amid all of the turmoil over all of the child protective industry's recent fuck-ups. In California, a report finds that nearly 150 female inmates were sterilized in the prisons without state approval and by coercing the women into receiving tubal ligations against their will. A grand jury criticizes California's Riverside County child protective industry because investigators weren't properly considering past history, such as parents' criminal records, when looking at the allegations of child abuse and neglect, and because they're often swamped, need more training, and lack effective procedural guidelines. Los Angeles CPS agents are pleading for the county supervisors to hire more child snatchers, but critics are saying that the problem is not a lack of money or workers, but rather a lack of structure and a lack of supervisors who do their jobs. And meanwhile, California's foster kids are struggling to make it in school after being deemed most likely to fail and drop out. In Massachusetts, the state launches an investigation into why CPS agents decided to leave a boy in his home after an abuse report when he was later killed. In South Dakota, Native American tribes are meeting to discuss how they could form and run their own foster care system. And in Wisconsin, the state Supreme Court says that a woman's agreement to give birth to a childless couple is an enforceable contract. In India this week, 6 cops are suspended for beating up juveniles in their youth detention facilities. In Kenya, the Child Welfare Society has launched a public appeal aimed at reuniting lost and abandoned children with their families. In New Zealand, they're upset because a child who was ratted out to the child protective industry had to wait 5 days to be seen by a social worker. The New Zealand Labour Party is calling for a review of child, youth and families, saying that staff are struggling to cope with an increasing number of CPS rats making calls into reporting abuse and neglect. And Pope Francis is acting to end years of scandals that damage the Catholic Church by specifying that sexual violence against children is a crime. In Canada, the government is admitting that 10 children died while in Alberta's foster care system during 2012 and 2013, with another 21 dying while they were being watched by the child protective industry. And in Ontario, an 82-year-old visitor of a Hamilton foster home was charged with sexually assaulting 2 young foster kids. In Australia, the New South Wales child protective industry is crying poverty, claiming that budget cuts are responsible for thousands of at-risk children and their families not being seen by a baby stealer. An Australian judge says that mothers in child custody cases are making up fake child sex abuse claims in order to get the upper hand and keep control of the kid. An Australian CPS rat is claiming systematic failure after ratting a family numerous times without any response from CPS agents. And Australian foster care agencies are fearing that their business will collapse as the number of families willing to warehouse stolen children continues to decline. In England, a report written 17 years ago that claimed that abuse in the country's children's homes where kids were protected from abuse and neglect was extensive, and now it has just been published in light of a new investigation. And it turns out that this report was kept secret because the insurance companies feared huge payouts to the victims. A British social worker is being accused of taking one family to KFC because she wanted some fast food, and intimidating and threatening other families that she was supposed to be looking after. Another British social worker is accused of serious lack of integrity after concealing her second job from the CPS bosses. And the British child protective industry is concerned that they're not seeing enough potential stolen target children. In entertainment news this week, Charlie Sheen tries to use his 2.5 Men co-star's case as a precedent for getting his child support to ex-wife Brooke Mueller dropped, since first of all, she no longer has custody of the kids, and second, because he doesn't want to pay for her drugs anymore, and because John Cryer doesn't have to pay child support since his ex lost custody of the kids. And Matt Damon's mom says that child actors are victims of child abuse. In Massachusetts, a real father is charged with snatching his own kids from their foster home. A Wisconsin foster father is charged with possession of child porn. In California, a convicted sex offender who had just gotten custody of his daughter has been arrested for driving with a bullet in his car and with the little girl being handed over to CPS. The real father of an American Indian child child who is center of a custody suit that went all the way to the U.S. Supreme Court has now filed to adopt the child in Oklahoma, which will drag things out in South Dakota. In Missouri, a real mother is accusing Child Protective of failing her son, who police believe was abused to death by his mean old stepmother. In Washington, a couple of real parents who are medical professionals are speaking out after losing their kid for 8 months over what they say was a medical mistake. In Texas, a real mother is frustrated with an ongoing investigation by CPS agents. And finally tonight, in Michigan, police find a wandering child's foster mother after she finally woke up and called them to report the kid missing nearly 3 hours after he had been found. For these stories and all the latest dirt on the child protective industry, visit www.legallykidnapped.com. And until next week, this is Baby LK, over and out.